We're going to move on to our new feature where we pick a particular director and we look at their favourite films from each of our viewpoints. And we have a danger here that this podcast could run to 2.5 hours because we are on to the specialist subject in Mastermind of the Reverend Andy Godfrey, which is Alfred Hitchcock. And let's start with you, Andy, because I know you're bursting to talk about your favourite film from Hitchcock. What's that?
Well, Hitchcock made 53 great films, of which I've seen 52 because one's missing. Psycho. Psycho for me all the way, because it broke so many boundaries. It changed the history of cinema. There's so much in that film that influenced and changed cinema. Up until that point in time, mothers in American films had always been portrayed, even in Hitchcock's previous films, as people who were a little bit loopy, people who were caring. You know, they were the people who looked after you. They were the people who took care of you. Mother and apple pie was the American way. Psycho changed that. Psycho was the first film to show a toilet ever on screen, and Hitchcock had the audacity to have it flushed as well. And that shocked audiences, absolutely genuinely shocked audiences to see a toilet on screen. I think that the shower scene, obviously, I was watching a documentary about it last night again, and Peter Bogdanovich, the filmmaker, was at the very first ever public screening, and he said the shower scene, you've got Bernard Herrmann's screeching violins, you've got Marion in the shower screaming, you've got the sound of the knife, which was actually the sound of a knife being plunged into a melon and into a bit of steak. And then you had people screaming on top of that. And he said that when he came out of the very first ever public screening of Psycho into Times Square at midday, he felt as if he'd been raped. That was the effect. Now, we forget this. We're talking 1960. Nothing like this. And up until that point as well, I think murder in films, it's always been a bit of a detachment. This can't happen to me. The murder on the screen will never happen to me. Here's an ordinary woman in a shower in a motel, completely innocent. And suddenly the shower in a motel becomes the most dangerous place in the world. Yeah. And Hitchcock was really worried about it. He was doing this TV show at the time, and the film was made by his TV crew because he couldn't get studios to sponsor it. And he had this idea that he was actually going to use it as a TV episode. He would cut it in half and show it as 2 parts. And it was his wife who persuaded him that it had to be seen in the cinema. That was he was worried because of all the taboos. And just very quickly, the one story I do love is that the Hitchcock sent the shower scene off to the censors, and they wrote back and said, you need to change this, this, and this. He waited a week, sent it back unedited. They came back and said, thanks for making the changes. And there he was a bit audacious, but Anthony Perkins, you look at the supper scene, Janet Leigh and Anthony Perkins together, absolutely phenomenal. 2 great actors at the top of their game in a scene that is really emotional roller coaster because he's talking about his mother. A boy's best friend is his mother is the line. She's thinking about the fact she's stolen this money. We think the film's going to be about her returning the money, and everything switches. And I love the detail that Hitchcock put into this. The scene where he moves a painting to poke through the spy hole and to see Marion in the shower. That painting is a painting called Susanna and the Elders by a French artist. And it was an ancient Greek story about 2 elderly men praying on a young virgin. So even Hitchcock had every little detail of that nailed down beautifully. In the opening scene, Marion's wearing white underwear. When we see her stealing the money, making up her mind to steal the money, she's wearing black underwear. She's gone from being a good girl to being a bad girl. If you look at the scene where she's packing her case to run away with the money, she's in her own apartment, but there's a shower behind her, a foretaste of what is to come. So Hitchcock keeps showing us this. She keeps walking across the room and the bathroom door's open and there's a shower there. Now, because we at the time don't know the significance, but he's planting the seeds. Every detail of that film to me is genius.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating that because one of the key shock values of Psycho, I think, is the fact this is Vivien Leigh, right? She is the star of the show. Yeah. You think you're in one type of film, and how far is the shower scene into it? Half an hour?
No, it's 2/3.
2/3. Okay, some way into the film.
Yeah,
but it's the equivalent. I guess the equivalent in a recent film would be Deep Blue Sea, something like that, where Samuel L. Jackson gets chomped in half suddenly, right? But go back to 1960, and you're not expecting the star of the show and a big star.
And of course, what Hitchcock did with the trailer, if you look at the trailer, he's in the bathroom and he pulls back the curtain, and it's Vera Mills in the shower.
Yes, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? Because it was also your favourite trailer of all time.
Yeah. But he also had this brilliant advertising campaign. You know, back in the 60s, films were just on a rolling basis in cinema. So you went in halfway through a film, you sat there, you waited, you sat through the first half of the film, and you left.
Yeah.
Hitchcock had this thing where he said nobody will be allowed in after the start of each showing. And there were billboards outside cinemas that said not even the President of America or the Queen of England herself will be allowed in after the start of each showing of Psycho. And there is, I mean, books and books and books have been written on that. There's a whole documentary, which is brilliant, called 78/52, just about the shower scene.
It's a good documentary.
It's a brilliant documentary. 78 cuts, 52 edits in 45 seconds.
Yeah. It's good.
Dare I ask, Andy, what your opinion is of the Vince Vaughn version?
Move on, Scott. I hate and detest, and it's vile and it's ridiculous and it's wrong. I mean, no, I don't even want to think about it.
No, you've upset him. You've raised his blood pressure, Scott.
It's vile. It's totally. Why would you want to remake Psycho in colour? I mean, Hitchcock said that the reason why it was made in black and white was because of the blood, and actually that was Hershey's chocolate sauce that's going down the drain. And it's not actually Janet Leigh in the shower even. It's an actress called Marley Renfro who body doubled for Janet Leigh. And she's the one that Anthony Perkins wraps up in the cellophane and the shower curtain and puts in the boot of the car. No. Just no. Move
Scott, don't ask any more follow-up questions, or we'll be here till 10 o'clock tonight. Yeah, that's a good choice, I have to say. Scott, can you beat Psycho in terms of your Hitchcock choice?
So I'm definitely not an expert like Andy is. I was working out this week how many of Hitchcock's films I've seen, and for me, I've seen 7 of them. For me, my favourite one is Rear Window.
Precinct 6, Sergeant Allgood.
Hello. Look, a man is assaulting a woman at 125 West 9th Street, second floor, at the rear. No, make it fast.
So I saw this for the first time maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I think it might have been during lockdown, possibly. And this film just blew me away in terms of the mystery and the thriller aspect of it. I thoroughly loved the narrative. I thought it was a really well written, really well crafted and directed film. The way it's edited from start to finish was sublime. The performances, Jimmy Stewart, love that guy. He is excellent in this film, as is Grace Kelly. Yeah. The production design, the way we see this film from the window that Jimmy Stewart is at, watching across the sort of lawn area to all the windows at the other side. I just think the way it was all designed within each of the different rooms and even the sort of courtyard area itself, it all just looks like it's so perfectly set. And just from start to finish, the suspense got me. I was hooked the whole time. I didn't know what was going to happen. And when I did think I knew what was going to happen, it would just throw something out there that would catch me off guard or make me a bit nervous about someone getting caught or not getting caught. Yeah. And without going into spoiler territory, I was just on the edge of my seat from start to finish, and I gave this one a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Yep,
Absolutely.
I did as
Absolutely.
well. And yeah, now I knew in advance that you were going to pick that one, because if you hadn't picked it, I would have picked Rear Window as well as my Hitchcock classic. I just think it's superb. And like you say, some of the suspense that is built up as to whether or not a certain character will be caught or not is just brilliantly done. And Jimmy Stewart acts it so well as well as to whether or not it's caught. It is just a classic film. Yeah. So my Hitchcock film comes from 2 years before I was born, in 1959, and that is North by Northwest.
Just a second, you.
Stay away from me. Let go. Let go of me. Stay away from me. Let go. Let go of me.
Now save the phony tears.
You just get back.
You little fool.
You just stay away from me.
No good, sir. You can't get involved in this.
We talked about Jimmy Stewart there, who was quite a regular, I think. I think he was a regular,
Yes.
wasn't he, Andy, in Hitchcock
Yeah, very
films?
much so.
Yeah, very
Cary
much so.
Grant, Grace Kelly, Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah. So North by Northwest has the other leading man as a suave, sophisticated guy, and that's Cary Grant playing Roger Thornhill, who's an advertising executive who is the classic wrong man in the wrong place. And he gets mistaken for somebody else and is involved in a murder and is framed for a murder. And the femme fatale here is Eva Marie Saint. And there's also wonderful appearance by a quite out of character James Mason playing a villain of the piece called Philip Van Damme. And the whole thing just cooks along. It's got its tongue firmly in its cheek. There's some lovely comic scenes going on. There's a lovely scene featuring his mother in a lift, where there's basically two bad people that Roger knows are out to get him. And his mother, played wonderfully by the actress Jessie Royce Landis, turns to them and said, "Are you gentlemen trying to kill my Roger?" And of course, they all look at each other embarrassed and then fall about laughing, and they all laugh at each other. And the whole lift is full of laughter until the doors open and he makes his getaway. And it's a wonderful scene, and it's absolutely brilliantly done. But the film has some classic set pieces. There's the obvious plane in the cornfield scene, which has been much repeated in other thrillers. And the finale set on the statues of Mount Rushmore, again, is a fabulous classic. And all of this happens to a wonderful Bernard Herrmann score. I think one of Bernard Herrmann's very best scores for North by Northwest. Sure, by today's standard, it's got some incredibly dodgy green screen moments. And some of the stuff you think, couldn't Hitchcock have just strapped a camera to the front of the car and filmed him driving down the mountain road, as opposed to putting some dodgy green screen stuff in the back window? So there are bits like that, which I think maybe he could have done that better. But it's a cracking film, and it has, to top it, one of the most suggestive final shots of any scene in any Hitchcock film, and in fact just about in any scene of a fast train going into a tunnel. Say no more. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
And the very next scene Hitchcock shot was The Evening of Psycho, with two people having a liaison in the hotel room. The very next scene he shot.
Yeah, there you go. Right. Yes, that was the following film, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So North by Northwest is my choice, but there's 3 classic films there. But to be honest, as a director, we are spoilt for choice there.
Oh.
There's lots and lots of great films. Rope is one of my favourites. And
Vertigo, of course,
Vertigo,
often voted the greatest film ever made.
Yeah.
You need to see Vertigo, Scott, if you haven't.
I have seen Vertigo. I'll be honest.
Did you like it?
I didn't enjoy it.
Fair enough.
I thought it was overrated.
Okay, fair enough.
I have that feeling as well about Vertigo. I tend to think it's a little bit overrated. But there are some classic black and whites, like Young and Innocent was one of my mother-in-law's favourite films. Whenever Young and Innocent came on the telly, she was right there watching it again.
You go back right into the silent era. I mean, Hitchcock made what I think is one of the greatest silent movies ever, The Lodger, which is subtitled A Tale of the London Fog, and it's a Jack the Ripper story. And even then, he's being in 1925 inventive, because he's got a scene where Jack the Ripper, is he Jack the Ripper or isn't he, is pacing in his room upstairs, and people downstairs are talking about the lodger upstairs. He wanted to show the juxtaposition between the two, so he had a glass ceiling put in as a sort of imaginary thing, but the people were looking up at a glass ceiling, so we see the lodger, Jack the Ripper maybe, walking up and down. And of course, Hitchcock made the first ever British talkie, which was Blackmail.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah.
And there's a scene in that where, again, it's a Jack the Ripper type story, and there's a scene where characters are having breakfast and they're going, please pass the butter and the knife. Could you pass me the jam and the knife? And every time the word knife is used, he wraps the volume up on the word knife. And it's just, the problem was nobody went to see it here. He re-released it a few months later as a silent movie with subtitles and cards, and it was a hit.
That's funny, isn't it? That's funny. Anyway, that's a good vein to mine in terms of a director. Next week, shall we do Ridley Scott? I think it would be rude not to. So let's do Mr. Ridley Scott next week, and we'll have a fight over who gets what. But there's quite a lot to choose from there, so that should be good.